It's time for Colts Central Radio with Tyler, Brooke, and Nate Dunlevy.
Hey, welcome to Colts Central Radio. I am Nate Dunlevy, filling in for my co-host Tyler Brooke, who's not here tonight. We've got a great show set up for you. Big news in Colts land with training camp just 10 days away. We're going to talk to John Cimasko, Jersey Johnny of 1070 The Fan, all about the suspension of Wesley Saunders and all other topics Colts related. But first, we've got one of my favorite guests, Tom Gower of the Football Outsiders. He's part of the outstanding Football Outsiders crew. If you do not regularly read footballoutsiders.com, you need to do so. It is the best site, period, for football knowledge. You need to go and check out that site. They've got an incredible publication out, Football Outsiders Almanac 2013, and we're going to talk to him all about the AFC South. Tom wrote the previews for both the Texans and Titans, and he's well acquainted with the Colts and Jaguars as well. So we'll talk to Tom, and we'll have a good time. Let's go ahead and get right in on that interview. And I'm here tonight with our good friend Tom Gower, from Total Titans and from the Football Outsiders. And we're going to talk a little AFC South. Tom has been participating in writing up the Football Outsiders Almanac, the absolute must-purchase preseason preview publication. That's a lot of P's, Tom. Tell us a little bit about FOA 2013, where people can find it and why they should buy it.
Sure. It's Football Outsiders Almanac is Football Outsiders annual preview. It includes chapters on all 32 teams. These are you go bookstore, look in a magazine if you can find one, and you see 2 pages on your favorite team. These are 32 in-depth essays, 2,500 words, 1,500 more words a unit comments than individual player capsules for all fantasy relevant players this year on every team around the league. So it's quite a bit more in-depth than any other publication that's out there. And and it's a mix of Football Outsiders key numbers, which is where the site really built its name, and it's also built on in-depth review of the game film of the team from the previous season. So, for example, I did the Titans and Texans chapters in the AFC South, and I spent 30, 40 hours with the all 22 watching each team before sitting down and writing the chapter.
That's fantastic.
It's a good mix of it's a good in-depth mix of stats and analysis of what actually went on the field to help explain the stats.
And I'll tell you, Tom, I purchase this every year. I don't bother asking for a media copy. I'm happy to shell over my $12.50 to the Football Outsiders, partially as a thank you for all the great work you guys do throughout the year, and also just because it's just such a great read. Absolute must-read, cover to cover, to help people get to know the NFL, and especially we're going to talk tonight a little bit more about the AFC South. And it seemed a little bit that the 4 predictions for the teams, their projected win totals were all pretty low. Where do you see the division shaking out? How do you see the standings looking at the end of the year?
Well, our numbers, all of our win projections are probably a little more compressed towards the middle than you might guess. So we run our numbers, and we do 10,000 simulations based on possible changes in a number of variables that affect how each team. That could affect each team. So our win projections in the book range from 10.5 wins for the best team to 5.5 wins for the worst team. Obviously, the whole NFL isn't going to end up with the best team having a record of 10-5-1 and the worst team 5-10-1. So we project the Texans with 9.3 wins in the book. That's actually the 9th best total in the league, and in a typical NFL season, the team with the 9th most wins would be 10-6, 11-5. So when thinking about the previews, we think about the team rank as much as the projected wins. So we have the Texans as the 9th best team, the Colts as the 18th best team, the Titans as the 27th best team, and the Jaguars as the 30th best team. And it's no surprise when you think a division has 2 of the 6 worst teams and only 1 above average team, the AFC South comes out as the weakest division in football.
And when you look at the strength of schedule numbers for all of those teams, that bears out. I think the
Yeah.
Jags, Texans, and Colts. I think the Colts had the easiest strength of schedule according to Football Outsiders of any team in the league. Is that right?
Yeah. The Colts are 32nd, the Jaguars are 31st, the Texans are 30th, and the Titans are 28th.
Wow. So that could possibly give one of these teams a chance if they could rise above sort of the mediocrity in the division. If anybody could prove to be a little bit better than we think, they could have a nice little run and come up with more wins than maybe what's projected.
Yeah, and I think, if you want to make the case for optimism for every team in the division can look and see at least 4 wins that they probably should get, and going 6-0 isn't completely off the table for any team, though it would be a particularly fortunate result for the Jaguars.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. This off season, we saw a lot of moves being made, especially by the Colts and Titans, and Houston also did a fair bit of scrambling. We'll leave the Jaguars off for now and just, they obviously made probably the most comprehensive franchise-changing moves, but I don't think any of us think that that's going to radically affect their final record this year. But between the Colts, the Titans, and Houston, did any of these teams manage to dramatically improve their rosters? And if so, how much? And which moves do you think helped the most?
The Texans did not. The Texans pretty much stayed the same. They changed a few things. They had one very interesting move that you and I discussed off the air, which was they let free safety Glover Quinn go and signed Ed Reed. Ed Reed, obviously future Hall of Famer, but he's 35, coming off a hip injury, missed a ton of tackles last year. But they brought him in for one very specific reason. And owner Bob McNair said after the postseason loss, and after they lost 3 or 4 at the end of the regular season, to go from the inside track to home field to not even getting a first round bye, that the team needed to improve their mental toughness. And you've heard rumblings around. This is a hard thing for a stat site to say, but you've heard rumblings around the league that the Texans are not considered a particularly tough team either.
What with those boss letter jackets? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and that can be both physically and mentally. And they brought in Reed to improve their mental toughness. And we'll see. A lot of times aging veterans from successful teams just end up playing like old players on their new teams.
Yeah.
So they're counting on him for a sort of transformative effect. The other things they did, they were more marginal. The non-Andre Johnson passing game last year was not very effective. They're counting on big things from, first-round pick DeAndre Hopkins, and we'll see about that. Last year they were hoping for immediate contributions from third-round pick Javier Posey and fourth-round pick Keyshawn Martin. Those didn't pan out.
And now Posey's gone for the season pretty much, right?
We'll see. He'll probably start the season on PUP, and he's talked lately about how he could be back at mid-season. But, neither he nor Martin even had double-digit catches last year, I don't believe. So it's sort of, it's a very big projection, especially, and, right, they'll be hoping for another full season of health for Johnson after he was banged up a lot of 2010 and 2011. So, 30-something wide receivers with a history of injury issues. Those are tough. But, the other thing the Texans are really hoping for is their offensive line really fell off from 2011 to 2012, especially the right side of the offensive line.
Yeah, they let two starters go, and it just didn't work out.
No, and, they're hoping they spent a third round pick on a right tackle, Brennan Williams from North Carolina, but both he and Derek Newton were injured in OTAs and missed a lot of time. Both guys should be back for training camp, but that really set them back, especially in their outside zone scheme that requires so much precise timing and coordination to run that play effectively. And, they really didn't have that last year, and you could really tell the difference, especially the second half of the season.
So if we're going to call the Texans a wash in their off season, They're a little bit older. What about Tennessee? I've taken a lot of heat. I was not a fan of most of the specific moves. I mean, there were some individual signings that I liked, but for the most part, I'm not a fan of what Tennessee did. I've taken a lot of heat for that opinion. But what about you? You're a Tennessee guy. You cover the Titans. You have easily the best Titans blog out there. What do you feel about the Titans moves? Do you feel like they upgraded? Is this a team that's looking to make a move, or are they really substantially better than the team that was, one of the worst scoring differentials in the NFL last year?
Well, the Titans last year had a bad offense and a bad defense, and they decided to fix their offense this offseason. And, one of the things that they seem to decide is that Jake is, owner Bud Adams was not happy with going 6-10 last year. And he indicated that, head coach Mike Munchak and others could be on the hot seat if results don't improve this year. So the Titans needed to get better, and, there wasn't a clear upgrade at quarterback on the market, plus Jake Locker has only had 1 year as a starter. But the Titans decided they weren't comfortable running the same sort of high-volume passing offense they ran under offensive coordinator Chris Palmer with Locker, and betting their jobs that he'd be able to execute it much better than he did last year. So they're going back to the same run-based offense that they ran for most of the Jeff Fisher era. And
can that win now? I mean, can you make a viable offense that way?
It's hard, but if you can't win with a passing game, you still have to try to win games.
That's true. What choice do you have? Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of, if I was going to get fired, if my team didn't go 9-7, then I would do a lot of what the Titans did.
Gotcha.
I probably would have spent a little more attention to the defense than they did, but they really did a lot on the they really spent most of their attention on the offense. They signed on the defense. They just signed Sandy Lee Hill, who was Detroit's fourth defensive tackle last year, and they're counting on him for a bigger role than he played. And the only clear upgrade they made was adding strong safety Bernard Pollard. Jordan Babineau last year was not very effective at all. And, Pollard's not exactly particularly good in coverage, but if they can, just let him play in the box, be a hitter, then he can, then I think he can help the defense. He's also philosophically simpatico with the other big name they added to the defense, Greg Williams, as a defensive senior, I think he's a defensive special assistant. So they retained coordinator Jerry Gray from the defense that gave up the most points in franchise history last year. And we'll see exactly what Williams is going to do. He and Gray have spent most of their coaching careers together, always with Williams in the superior position, either as head coach to Gray's defensive coordinator or defensive coordinator to Gray's defensive backs coach. So it'll be an interesting relationship, but, our Football Outsiders projections are not very optimistic about the Titans, but sometimes defenses just improve a lot from one year to the next.
Just random.
Yeah, if there is a reason for it, we haven't found it.
Gotcha. And there are some young players on the Titans that can seriously hit. I mean, Zach Brown was a big revelation last year. He really brings the wood. I mean, you could have a player like that all of a sudden make that leap and become, one of the better linebackers in the league. It wouldn't be a shock. It might be a little surprise, but you wouldn't be like, where did that come from? Because he showed talent. And if you get a guy have an outstanding year like that, then, anything's possible.
Yeah, but I don't think they're talented enough on either the defensive line or in the secondary to really make the kind of jump that that they need to play ball control offense and be successful. But
that bad schedule could help them too. I mean, they had one last year, but a bad schedule, you never know when you just hit a hot streak of bad quarterbacks, and they can make you look a little bit better than you really are.
They went 10-6 and made the playoffs in 2007 with Vince Young in his second season and Wendell White getting 300 carries. If that team can win 10 games, this team, the 2013 Titans, can win 10 games.
That's a good point. So what did you think about the moves Indianapolis made? There were some really highly criticized free agent signings. Just it was such a terrible roster last year. There were some ways in which you couldn't help but trip over a player, and he would be an upgrade over what they had. But whether they made the most of their free agency dollars, I think, is another topic. Where do you think you saw the Colts? You and I saw Indianapolis put together last year live. So where do you think the Colts will be in relationship to where they were a year ago?
Yeah, they're definitely more talented on defense. I wouldn't have paid Eric Walden $16 million over 4 years either. I don't think anybody other than Ryan Grigson would have. But Grigson did some things last year that were pretty good. So maybe he knows something everybody else doesn't. And I think the Walden signing is kind of like a Titan signing. It's probably too much money for the player relative to what he brings to the table, but he's clearly an upgrade.
Sure.
So it's like the Titans paying Sean Green $10 million over 3 years. You paid who, how much, but
right.
He's still an upgrade. It's Greg Toller is a good nickelback. He's not really been a successful starter in his career.
He's had a lot of injuries. I look at him as pretty much a lateral move from Gerard Powers. Everybody in Arizona's probably saying exactly the same thing about Powers because they basically swapped corners. Well, if he's healthy, then blah blah blah.
Yep, and Toller was another guy. If he's healthy, he's worth a contract. He'll probably be worth a contract, and if he's not, then oh well.
Right.
And Vontae Davis had an interesting split. He was pretty awful the first 5-6 weeks of the season, and then he was better, but not nearly as good as people think he was the second half. As some Colts fans think he was the second half of the season.
He's honestly, Tom, in my time, he is the most overrated Colt by fans that I've ever witnessed. I've never seen a player in which the dichotomy between how he played on the field and how fans feel about him is greater. Fans think he was tremendous, and some of it is just an urge to justify what was clearly an overpay when they gave up a second-round pick to get him. But fans seem to love him, and I just didn't see it on the field, to be honest.
One of the guys on the Football Outsiders staff, Andy Benoit, loves Vontae Davis, and I think Benoit sees the same thing that why the Colts were willing to give up a second-round pick and why Davis was a second-round pick in the first place. That he's very physically talented. It's just a matter of actually playing up to the level of physical talent, which is why he was a second-round pick instead of a first-round pick, and why the Dolphins were willing to give him up for a second-round pick because they knew they wouldn't be re-signing him in a year or two.
Yeah.
So, but he's better than what he's didn't make the playoffs last year without Vontae Davis. Playing Cassius Vaughn and Powers and Butler and whoever else they tried out there last year.
Their points per game and their defensive passer rating were unchanged because he missed a lot of games. They were unchanged in the games he didn't play versus the games he did. So I think it's kind of hard to make the argument that he helped the defense very much because the numbers, I don't obviously have the DVOA splits for those weeks, but just some of the raw numbers don't look very much different with him in versus out of the lineup. So I think it's hard to make that argument, but many have tried that they don't make the playoffs without him. If that's true, then yeah, it's a good trade no matter what.
Yeah, but I think the improvements that'll really help the Colts are the ones they made on the offensive line. Andrew Luck was hit more than any other quarterback in the league last year. Part of that was the Colts were a high-volume passing offense, and the other part of that was, Jeff Lincolnbach and Winston Justice and Mike McGlynn and, Anthony Costanzo. By Football Outsiders starting numbers, he had 36 blown blocks, leading to sacks or hurries on pass plays, which is just an unbelievable number.
Yeah, you really see a difference between his run blocking and his pass blocking.
Yeah, and you see the run blocking show up in the numbers and how well they ran to the left side, but that's not exactly the sort of pass blocking numbers you want from your first round pick in his second season.
Yeah. Now, we just have a few minutes left, Tom, so let me ask you real quick about a couple of things. First of all, give me a scenario where Indianapolis wins the AFC South.
A couple scenarios. Number one, the defense improves a lot more than we think it's going to. Sometimes everything just clicks. Toller stays healthy. Walden is an impact run defender. Defensive line plays better. Mathis gets a ton of pressures.
Pagano gets a whole year coaching.
Yep. Number two, it's Houston takes a big step back. One of a couple reasons. The defense, for some reason, whether injury or just one of those things, falls off a cliff, falls from very good to below average, or the offense declines for one of a number of reasons. Either the passing game falls apart, Matt Shaw offensive line doesn't come together the way they think it's going to. Andre Johnson and Arian Foster gets hurt. It's not a situation where everything has to go right. It's just a couple things have to go pretty right, or a couple things have to go pretty wrong for the Texans, for the Colts to win the division. So by Football Outsiders number, we have them with about a 1 in 3 chance of making the playoffs.
I would throw another scenario in there where Andrew Luck just takes an absolute leap and becomes an elite quarterback.
And, we've talked, you and I have talked about this before. Luck he did a lot of things that should lead him to being great in the future, but he was pretty average last year. But if playing for Cap Hamilton, playing behind an upgraded offensive line, he makes the leap from the sort of player we think he can be to that sort of player, then I was hoping the Colts would be down. As a fan of the Titans, I was hoping the Colts would be down for a couple years and not just 2 or 1.
Yeah, really 1. Yeah, it's hard to call them down last year, even though we know on paper they weren't as good as they looked in their final record. So, hey, Tom, and just the last couple minutes, tell everybody where they can pick up a copy of the Football Outsiders Almanac, and plug any other sites you have. How can people find you on Twitter, all of that?
Sure. Football Outsiders Almanac is available in a PDF version at Football Outsiders. That's just www.footballoutsiders.com. You can also pick up a copy of Kubiak, our fantasy football projections, which come in a customizable spreadsheet that can be changed to account for your specific league scoring and roster rules, and that will be updated regularly throughout up until the start of the regular season. So you can buy it whether you're drafting now, 2 weeks from now, or at the beginning of September, and always have the most up-to-date projections. If you want a print copy of Football Outsiders, it'll be on Amazon. We've submitted it. Should be on Amazon, available for purchase about July 24th. And so you can find my work at Total Titans, www.totaltitans.com. I also have the occasional column for Football Outsiders. I'll be having, I wrote a piece a while back on how teams play against 11 personnel, one tight end, 2 wide receivers, and I'll be continuing that series with looks at how they play against 11 and 12 personnel. Using Football Outsiders numbers to show that. You can also follow me on Twitter at Thomas Gower, and really just buy the book. It's how much I get paid depends on how many people buy the book. So buy copies for your friends, buy copies for your family, buy copies and give them away to random people on the street.
Hey, I will echo that. Tom, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again when the Colts get ready to play the Titans. I really appreciate your time, brother, and we'll see you in Indianapolis later this year, I hope. I got a ticket already for you, man. So thanks for coming on tonight. We really appreciate you. Go buy a copy of FOA.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
And now we're back with our second guest, John Cimasko, a.k.a. Jersey Johnny. Everyone here in the Indianapolis market is more than familiar with John. We're going to talk a little current events with the Colts here tonight. John, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
Hey, I've always wanted, since usually it's the other way around. You're asking me the questions. I have always wanted to ask you on the air. I find your story of how you've grown to become a radio personality in Indianapolis pretty fascinating, because it sort of portends what a lot of fan bloggers have gone through over the years. Can you tell the people real quick how it is that you, of all people, have come to have your own radio show about the Colts in Indianapolis?
Sure, Nate. I'll make it really, really quick. I became a Colts fan when I was young, even though I lived in North Jersey and, saw the Giants play. I go back far enough to remember Unitas and Mackey and Berry and those guys in the mid-'60s, and saw them on TV a couple of times, became a big fan. After they moved here to Indianapolis, my brother and I came out to visit in 1988, went to a game, came back in 1989, and thought it was a nice place to live, Indianapolis, from what I could see. I loved the city, brought home a real estate book. One thing led to another, and in 1990, my family and I moved here. So 1996, WIBC decided that they wanted to have a couple of fans do a post-game show. They were the flagship of the Colts. So I used to call in once in a while to the morning show with Pigeon Terry and the sports talk show in the early evening. So they gave me a shot. That was 1996. I had a partner, Grover. He left in 2001. So it's been my show. Believe it or not, it's been 17 years of doing 17 years since 1996 of doing a Colts show, whether it's WIBC and then, of course, they moved to the FM, and 1070 became the ESPN radio affiliate. So it's been fun. I consider myself very fortunate to have it. I don't take it for granted because I always see it as a great opportunity.
You're sort of the original fan blogger long before Al Gore invented the internet, right? Like you're the first guy out there who sort of crossed that line between sitting in the cheap seats on Sunday and then getting the all the fame and glory that comes with being a Colts media personality, huh?
Yeah, it is. And again, Nate, I really do consider myself very fortunate, as you know, to be in this position.
Well, you're
really
very talented, too, and that helps.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's been a lot of fun. It really has been. And, the opportunity to go watch practice, to do different things. And I like it a lot. I try to keep up, of course, and be well-versed on the team itself, but it's a passion of mine. This team is, the game of football, I've always really enjoyed it. And the Colts, from years and years ago when I was just a kid, it really it's stuck with me through the years. And there have been some down times, but when I was a kid, Unitas was great, and heck, right on through. And then to currently, what are the odds that you go from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck? I mean, to have one bad year when perhaps one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, not to jump the gun, but he's available, and that's who you take.
Well, I think one of the things that's always one of the reasons that makes your show always compelling to me, it was always a good listen, is even though you are a fan, and I always feel like you have a very honest take on how the team's doing. Just because you're a fan doesn't mean you have to, but blow roses out of your rump all day long. It's always a very fair and honest take on the Colts. So let me ask you about some of the bad news that we had today. Wesley Saunders going to be suspended for 8 games. Now, I know nobody necessarily was counting on Saunders to have 50 receptions or carry us to the Super Bowl, but this is another in a string of just sort of bad headlines for Indianapolis. What's your take on his suspension, and is this just a isolated incident, or is there something going on with the sort of character of the players that we have now in Indy?
Yeah, it doesn't look good, and say what you want, it doesn't reflect well on the team right now because there have been 3 incidents in the last month or so, and,
just like 2 weeks.
It's not good, and people can say what they want. Well, percentage-wise, you look at the general population and people get in trouble and all, but still, this city's seen the highs and lows of having good quality guys and guys who aren't angels off the field or off the court. And one thing I've learned about this city, this fan base, they have a very low tolerance for that. They really do. They don't. They just do. And to their credit, they do. Okay, they set the bar high, Nate, with these pro athletes in this city, and they expect them to live up to it. Yeah, I realize everybody gets in trouble. I realize everybody makes mistakes, but suspension for 8 games. That's you've made more than one mistake, haven't you?
Yes, exactly.
LeVon Brazil, that was his second offense, correct? Because he
Yeah.
got this suspension. So everybody deserves a second chance, sometimes third chances, but you have to wonder, how seriously are you taking your profession? That's really what it comes down to. And again, I give the fan base credit in this city, in this state, because they do set the bar high for their expectations off the field, off the court of their professional athletes.
Well, and you have to wonder too, I mean, whether it really behooved Ryan Grigson to kind of come out and say, I think it was about a year ago or so, that he basically said we're not as interested in, maybe drafting the highest or bringing in the highest quality character people. We're just looking for people who can play, which seemed like a little bit of a slap in the face at the previous regime. And we know that it was very in vogue in the media to make fun of the previous regime. So people were like, yeah, that's good. Let's get some mean
Right.
SOBs in here or whatever. But now you see the sort of fallout from that.
Yeah, it's a tight line that you walk. You know that. I mean, who? You know what? I've always said they need some offensive linemen on this team that are nasty. But you know what? Nasty on the field, not nasty off the field. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want the guy kicking in somebody's headlights in the drive-through lane like White Castle because he's not happy. That's not the nasty that we're looking for. We're looking for nasty on the field, and so. But some of Polian's guys had issues too through the years.
Sure.
They weren't all Eagles, and let's be honest. The sport these guys play, they're just not all angels. And we don't hear about certain things. I'm sure that goes on. But again, I still think Grigson wants high quality characters. I understand what you're saying, but. You know how much of a headache this is for him and for that staff and for that front office out on West 56th Street. This is the last thing they want a week before training camp starts.
Everybody's finishing vacations, and it's not cool.
And let's be honest, the media, they'll make more of it than it is. Okay, they will. By the way, I just wanted to touch briefly. I realized a long time ago that. You have to be objective to have credibility, Nate, okay? Sure. And I'm not paid by the Colts. I really like that team a lot, but I have to be honest. I can't get on there when they play horribly and say, hey, that was pretty good. So I feel without objectivity, you have no credibility in the media. So that's how I try to go about my business.
Well, you do a really fantastic job of it. So let me ask you then, what are your expectations for this season? You're always asking me questions like that, so now you're on the hot seat. Are you optimistic? Do you feel like this team, like it was fair to say this team, overperformed last year? Like, what do you expect? What would be a satisfying? Obviously winning the Super Bowl, but short of that, what would you say? That was a good year. I'm happy that they did X.
Oh yeah, I would think you look. 10-win season, I would think. And let's be honest, last year, the ball did bounce their way. There were just such improbable, victories that this team had, to their credit, of course,
Sure.
And it went the other way, too, that Jacksonville game. That was, but they had more go in their favor than, and sometimes the ball bounces your way. I will say this, though. If you saw the year in review DVD that's out of the Colts last year, and you watch some of the plays that Andrew Luck made in slow motion, close up, you just shake your head and go, "This dude's good." We're gonna witness the development and career of one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time right here in this city, back-to-back Peyton Manning and then Andrew Luck, because you watch him and his athletic ability, his strength, his uncanny knack of feeling the pressure, getting away from it, shaking off tackles, looking downfield and finding a wide receiver. So I'd say 10 wins. I don't. I'm almost thinking that Houston's missed the wave to a degree. I could be wrong. I like what they've done in some ways, but how much have they improved? And heck, they had everything running on that last regular season game last year when they came to Indianapolis, and the Colts beat them.
They've never won here, and that has to be hanging over them.
I would think so. So, And you look at the schedule, and certainly games jump out at you, Nate. I mean, that are tough. Let's be honest. I mean, Seahawks, the Chargers, the Broncos, 3 in a row, 49ers early. Those are all tough. But then you look at some of the other games, and there's a lot of winnable games on this schedule. There's no doubt. Really going to come down to two things as far as I'm concerned. The offensive line, do they have guys up there that can get the job done? And then can they get somebody that rushes the passer opposite Robert Mathis is going to be key. And again, as you and I talk about all the time, it's one thing to talk about stopping the run. Yeah. Can you stop the run? You know, one thing I was thinking, I know you downplay the running game a little bit, and I would agree with you to an extent on that. I think the key is when you got a lead, a 2-score lead with 8 minutes to go, I think that's when you're running game. If you have one, that's when it's important, because then you know what? Pick up 3 first downs and run from 8 minutes down to 3 minutes and wrap up the game. But the offensive line,
we saw that in the Super Bowl against Chicago. If they built the lead in the first half on the pass, in the second half, they just kept expecting Peyton Manning to pass the ball, and he just kept handing it off and all the way to the Lombardi Trophy. So.
And let's not forget that playoff game against the Ravens. I think Dominic Rhodes just tore it up on that last, that last drive and burnt up. So again, that's where it comes into play. But again, I think it's going to come down to the offensive line. I think the key to this team, in a positive way, is going to be Ahmad Bradshaw. What a tremendous pickup! If you watch that guy, he's a beast. He's I don't know. Do you go back to Adrian James since they've had a running back like him, perhaps?
Probably. That's that big, that's that powerful, and it would have to be early Edge, when Edge was really savage, 2099 Edge. But definitely a major upgrade at running back. And that's going to be a dynamic that I don't think a lot of people are prepared for with this team.
No, and it would be nice to see them run the ball, when they want to. Let's put it that way, when they want to. But I'm real curious to see what this offense is going to look like game plan-wise. Yeah. Because we saw one year what Bruce Arians did. Pep Hamilton comes in. Are they more conservative? Which wouldn't bother me in some ways, but you have Andrew Luck. You want to throw the football as well.
That's right. Yes.
So I'm real curious to see what this scheme is going to be like. That's another fun thing I think that we have to look forward to. Hopefully a fun thing of what this offense looks like out there. Do they have a fullback out there? How many times do they use 2 tight ends? How do all these parts fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, John, I really want to thank you for coming on. Can you tell the people real quick when they can hear you regularly and how people can find you on Twitter?
Sure. At Jersey_Johnny. I'm always looking for followers. When I get to 1070, which is the number for our radio station, I'm good. I won't beg anymore. At Jersey_Johnny. And then we're on 1070 The Fan in Indianapolis. Normally noon to 2. We are 2 to 4 this Sunday. Then once the season starts, the 1 o'clock games will be on 7 to 9. The 4 o'clock games will be on earlier pre-games. So a lot to look forward to. But Ken, just noon to 2. And if I could quickly plug my auction I'm going to have for our honor flight. I'm going to run on my show. You're going to get 2 lower-level tickets to the Colts Raiders game, a hotel downtown that Saturday night, dinner Saturday night downtown. I'll get you to the tailgate. So we're going to get that going in a couple weeks, and every penny will go to our flying World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the monument that those guys earned almost 70 years ago.
John, I want to thank you again for your work with the Honor Flight Project. It's inspirational and absolutely a good cause. How can people bid?
We're going to just run it on my show. We're going to start taking calls. Matt Hicks, not this week. We're off next week for the Brickyard, but then we're going to start in August, run it for maybe 3 weeks. And Matt Hicks, my board op/producer, will just take your bids off the air. And then when we get to the last week of the bidding, 10 minutes before our show ends, whoever's the high bidder is going to win all that stuff, plus I'm going to get more. It's going to be a really, Saturday night hotel downtown and Colts lower level, get on the field before the game, tailgate, dinner downtown Saturday night. So, and every penny will go to help fly World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the monument that those guys earned.
It's a trip of a lifetime to sponsor a trip of a lifetime. So thank you so much for doing that. And everybody make sure you call in to Jersey's show and bid on those. John, thank you very much. I know we'll talk soon. Really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah, we'll talk real soon. We'll talk Sunday when you come on my show. How's that sound, mate?
That sounds perfect, Johnny.
Cigar fans, check out fifthdowncigar.com and enter the coupon code PFC to get 10% off your order. Lots of nice high-end cigars. That's fifthdowncigar.com. Enter the code PFC for 10% off your order.
Well, that'll put a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank once again my guest, Tom Gower of the Football Outsiders. Go to footballoutsiders.com and purchase a copy of Football Outsiders Almanac. And also John Cimasko at Jersey_Johnny, local radio host here in the Indianapolis area. Be calling into his show in the coming weeks. You can hear me on there fairly regularly, and as well, make sure you bid on the prizes for the Honor Flight. He does great work bringing World War II veterans to the nation's capital to see the monument that they built. So I want to thank both of those guys. Tune in next week. We're going to have Russell Baxter on, other great guests for sure. Tyler Brooke will be back with me. Until then, go Horse.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.